I've studied the form of comics ink. I spent a third of my life in a hospital bed with nothing else to do but read. I believe comics are our last link to an ancient way of passing on history. The Egyptians drew on walls. Countries all over the world still pass on knowledge through pictorial form. I believe comics are a form of history that someone somewhere felt and experienced.
Welcome everyone, this is the Comics in Motion. My name is Chris Phelps and my good friend and co-host is Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Hi Chris, and hello to our listeners out there. Welcome to the Comics in Motion show. What we like to do here is we like to review media like movies and TV shows that are based on comic books. Myself, I'll be reviewing the media from the perspective of a long-time comic book fan. And my co-host Chris will be reviewing mainly from that media perspective, and we'll walk through our given choice of the week and we'll give our different thoughts on it. What we also like to do is we also like to spoil the hell out of everything we review. So if you haven't watched our choice of the week, then I'd advise you to proceed with caution. And what we also love you to do is to head over to Apple Podcasts or your podcast catcher of choice and drop us a 5-star review. This really helps us grow the show and gets us out to other listeners. So Chris, how's it going? Welcome back.
Yeah, good mate. You okay?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So there's only one trailer that I want to speak about this week. Well, I'll probably speak about others as well. But have you seen the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer?
Oh, excellent. Excellent, Davis. You actually messaged me. I'd missed it. Said it's dropped because you'd already pre-warned me, hadn't you? We both knew it was coming, but I wasn't sure what time. And yeah, I was very, very impressed, especially the undertone of the music, Dave. That was fanboy heaven for me. The old Spidey music.
Yeah, it was brilliant, wasn't it? I mean, again, they just seem to know over at Disney, you know, whether it's, you know, part of the Marvel universe, whether it's part of the Star Wars universe, they seem to know how to bring us something new, but just there's that nostalgia there as well. And I thought the music to the trailer was absolutely brilliant. But what did you make to the reveal at the end? So we're getting to see Mysterio.
I was very impressed. The only thing I think I can, and I hate to do this because I think it's a great trailer and it's proper got me wanting to pre-book them tickets, Dave, straight away, is it sort of ruins a little bit of what's going to happen in the Avengers because there's not really any hints or sort of things. But if this is obviously after the great snap, well, we know he survives. For me, I'd rather have seen the trailer for this as like a bit of an extra at the end of the Avengers. If you know, just what I mean.
Yeah.
I just think it ruins whatever's going to happen in the Avengers. I want the mystique of Endgame to be about how or if they come back. And by releasing this trailer, for me, it's not ruined. It's not going to ruin the film by any stretch. It's my most anticipated film this year. But I just think, did they really, really need to reveal the hand before even Captain Marvel's come out? I don't know. But as a trailer, fantastic, Dave. The setting, somewhat different. It's bringing, obviously, we've got the girl now. He's calling her MJ as well properly. Obviously, the love interest, Mary Jane. But I've got to say, Dave, the Aunt May casting, it's got to be the most suspect casting I have ever seen, ever. And that is me, you know, that is, you know, she looks literally the same age as Tom Holland, you know, and she's very, very attractive. But also it's just it's a very unusual, because she's always been known as like this old lady, hasn't she, in her 60s sort of thing. And it really did. When she was in the last one, you know, Spider-Man Homecoming, it was really distracting, thinking she's not Aunt May. You know, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Dave, but it's just something that's always, it's like they're just having a joke with the audience.
I tweeted out, I think it was yesterday, because I don't know who, I'd picked it up. Various people had tweeted out this same image, so I don't know the person who created it to give them credit, quite honestly. But you know how the whole 10 years later thing is sweeping the internet at the minute, people posting pictures of themselves 10 years ago and now. And what's the difference? And of course, they've got the old Aunt May from the original Spider-Man trilogy 10 years ago, and you've got Marissa Tomei as Aunt May now. So I was like, yep, she wins.
Yeah, big time she wins. But yeah, again, very, very shades casting. But I just thought the trailer was great, Dave. I think I'm getting tongue-tied now, apologies. But I honestly believe maybe this should have come out before the Avengers Infinity War and that. Put a bit more meat on the Spider-Man character. But we'll see how it goes and what the timeline and storyline is of this. The only thing that I was thinking before we recorded this was, in Infinity War, and obviously, spoiler, guys, if you've not seen it, so apologies, but as Dave says at the top of the show, we do spoil the hell out of everything. He is on a bus with his schoolmates, isn't he, when he gets on the spider suit. Now, there's a bit of me pinging in my head thinking, is this before Infinity War? And they're on that bus coming back from this trip to Europe. That's the only thing in my head at the moment logically would make sense why this would come out. But then again, you're skew-iffing timelines, aren't you? Because we would have had Captain Marvel, then Avengers. So I don't know, but that's just something that might justify why this has come out.
Yeah. So I think you've nailed it, quite honestly, because when I first saw the trailer, I thought the same again. So not only do we see Tom Holland's Spider-Man there, he's perfectly fine, perfectly happy, and all of the places he's at, it's all very populated. So in the comics world, for the last, I would say, decade or so, probably a bit more, you've had comic previews come out.
Yeah,
and so in the old days, here in Old Man Radio, you used to walk into the comic shop and you didn't know what was kind of coming out, what was happening. But as time progressed and people order things ahead of time and whatever, the comic stores the publishers release previews, so you can actually see what's coming out 3 months in advance. So you're in the middle of a story right now and there's some sort of peril, you think someone might not make it out of this, and then you just have a quick look at the preview and you're like, oh yeah, they're all fine. Or it's like, you might be reading Death of Wolverine and then you see, oh, he's back next week. But probably not a bad example because he was gone for a couple of years. But so yeah, when I saw the trailer, I immediately thought to the comic previews. I thought, you've done the same thing, but I've never seen it done on such a scale before, where you've ruined where we are currently in that timeline. But there's a thing called Occam's razor, right? Little bit of education. I learned about this when I was doing physics. Occam's razor. Pretty much the most obvious answer is probably the right one. It's not always the right one, but just probably.
Yeah.
So if you have to make, excuse upon excuse upon excuse, it becomes more improbable. So a few hours after, I was thinking, you know what? This is before Infinity War. It has to be.
Yeah,
because you've got Spider-Man all there fine. Like I say, you've got highly populated areas. Everyone seems to be fine, apart from Mysterio fighting what looks like Hydro Man, and you've also got Nick Fury. Nick Fury's there all fine. Well, he's dusted as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
So I just think. I think this is before Infinity War, which is, most of the Marvel movies that have come out have been one after the other. But they're already playing around with it a bit, aren't they, with Captain Marvel? They're setting that back in the 90s. So we already know they're going to be playing around with the time a little bit. But yeah, trailer looks absolutely great. And can't wait to see it. But obviously we've got Captain Marvel and Infinity War to get through before that. So the other bit of news that I just wanted to touch on was that Daredevil Season 3 actually won a Rotten Tomatoes Golden Tomato. It won it for the best reviewed superhero TV show of 2018, which, there's quite a few out there. So I thought that's quite a prestigious award. And obviously, you and I, we both went through it. We both really enjoyed it. But then it ended up cancelled, and I don't know. It just, again, it strikes me as being odd this whole cancellation thing, because all the things that we're hearing is that this is really more driven from Netflix than it is from Disney.
Well, Dave, I think, to be honest, it was without doubt my favourite show. I've said it numerous times. I'm not trying to tread over old ground. It's simply fantastic. And also, on the back of that, Dave, because I did see that myself about the review score, Vincent D'Onofrio, obviously the Kingpin, has retweeted, and he's actually mentioned on his Twitter account regarding a movement that's going regarding Daredevil called, bit of original, Dave, Save Daredevil. You can sign a petition, which I am now one of the signature people, which I'm sure you'll be joining. At the moment, I think it's just under 200,000 people have joined it to save it. So I don't know who he's going to be presented to. I presume it's going to be Disney at some point. But things could potentially go in the right way for us. And that's from a selfish point of view, because we loved it so much.
Yeah, I can imagine there was a whole think tank put together. What should we call it? What should we call it? You could call it all these different things, all these cryptic things. Man Without Fear. Save Daredevil. That'll do. Nailed it. But yeah, I probably will sign this petition. But you know what? Where we are in 2019, I'm a bit petitioned out. As soon as people are upset with anything, they put a petition, and I'm like, has this ever changed anything? I don't actually know.
Yeah.
In the middle of all the Brexit stuff and that, aren't we? As soon as that was voted for, let's have a petition to... Well, hang about that. You had a vote. It's kind of equivalent to a petition. So, yeah, I will sign it. Will it do anything? No, but if it takes me 30 seconds and there's a little bit of a chance that we can continue to see that Daredevil universe carry on or be resurrected, if you like, then I think that would be great.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I just think he's one of them things. It's too good, Dave. It's not like he's gone out on a damn squib. It's gone out on higher than it's ever been.
Yeah, I think it did. A lot of the comics for Daredevil, for years and years, they were just grinding him down further and further, and there was no let up at all. And so for years and years, this went on. So I think in the series, they could have ended it on a bit of a downbeat turn as well. But it did feel like a bit of an end. I think they kind of knew. Now, they dropped in, spoilers if you haven't seen it, for the next 30 seconds, but they dropped in that little end credit, didn't they, with the bullseye?
Yes. Yeah,
having his spine replaced. But, that was the only thing. That the actual story did seem to draw to a close, and there was a clean arc from series 1 through to the end of 3. So, look, I hope we see a series 4. I really like the cast that they've got. And I'd like to see that continue. So just before we go into our choice of the week, I just want to share with you one of the other podcasts from our podcast friends, and we'll be back with you right after this break.
Hello there, physically attractive podcast listener. My name is Steve Ross.
I'm Sean Crandall.
I'm Dustin White, and we're the hosts of
Dregs of Craigs.
On our podcast, we explore the most bizarre, repulsive, and downright confounding Craigslist ads we can find from all over the country, live for your amusement.
Come find out the best place to book an axe-throwing party for your child's birthday.
Stay up to date on Mario's Hawaiian Sex Marathon.
Or just sit back and relax as we make more anime references than any rational human being should be comfortable with.
It's a hilarious exploration of how we as a species are drifting further and further from the possibility of redemption.
And we want you along for the ride. Listen to Dregs of Craigs on Stitcher, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts.
So if you listened to last week's show, we both decided that we were going to review Unbreakable with the impending release of Glass. So Dave, have you got any comic background on this one?
Well, kind of, because this is a bit in the show where we talk a little bit about comic background, isn't it? Now, Unbreakable isn't actually directly adapted from any particular comic book. But it is very comic booky, and it's very much inspired by that whole superhero genre. And I think particularly from the golden age, I would say. Now, as well as comic books appearing prominently throughout the movie, there are some themes which make it very much a superhero movie. And this was one where M. Night Shyamalan, he'd done Sixth Sense. He's done a few things since Unbreakable as well. I think for me, Unbreakable and Sixth Sense were kind of his peak. And then I think he fell out of favor a little bit with the general population because it's like, oh, where's the twist? But cinema goers, including me, we didn't know this was going to be a superhero movie going into it. But there are a few themes. So what are the themes that make this kind of a comic book movie? Well, having a hero, having a superhero in there who's got an arch nemesis, but they're also connected in some way, so think Charles Xavier, Magneto, Superman, Lex Luthor. Quite often the superheroes have a load of arch villains to work with, but there is usually one that's fairly prominent there. Batman and Joker would be another one that comes to mind. Now, it's subtly done throughout the movie, and I think looking at the posters and stuff for Glass, it's a bit more prominent there, but the color scheme is quite cleverly used. So when David's on the screen, you can see there's kind of a green theme to it. And then when Samuel L. Jackson's, so Elijah, or Mr. Glass, when he's on screen, you see purple, he's dressed in purple, and you get this kind of purple feel to it. So having those colored themes, I think, is another thing that steps out. Now, the idea of having a weakness for our heroes. So again, for Superman, it's his kryptonite. You can't have just a hero who doesn't have any weakness, because where's the story that you're going to be able to write in that? Now, for David in Unbreakable, it's water, we find out. And I thought I'd just mention some of the lesser known weaknesses nowadays that have been dropped, because I mentioned quite a bit of this is out of the golden age. If you think when, in the Silver Age, when Marvel came more to prominence, almost the superheroes' weakness was more about just their regular personas. Think Spider-Man, Peter Parker. How's he going to pay the rent? How's he, balance his superhero life and his personal life? It became more like that than a specific weakness. So some of these that I'm not sure you might know about, Chris. So Aquaman, we discussed the other week. So initially he couldn't be separated from water for more than an hour or he'd lose his powers, which, seems quite amusing now, isn't it? He has to keep running back to water every hour. It's just like, well, why would you come up to land then? Now, I don't know if you know this, Chris, but Thor, initially, when he was written, he had a human persona as well, called Donald Blake. That was the human part to him. And when he held his hammer, he became Thor. Now, for the movies, they've dropped that, and I think it's been better for it, quite honestly, because it is a little bit golden age. But if Thor let go of his hammer back in this period for more than 60 seconds, then he'd turn back to Donald Blake. So that was a bit of a weakness as well. Another one, Human Torch. His weakness was asbestos. Again, bit random, and there was an asbestos man back in the day. Now we get to a bit more of a strange one here. So Wonder Woman, who's held up as being this kind of feminist icon almost. Her weakness was being tied up by a man.
What? Well, that took a turn.
So,
let's just put a full stop on that one, Dave.
Well, maybe, because I wasn't on the Wonder Woman show. Now the creator was basically he was living with his wife, but they had a live-in partner, and it's supposed to be his live-in partner who Wonder Woman's very much based on. Now, when you guys did the show, because it was yourself and Jamie who did it, you didn't touch on all of this, so I'm saving this maybe for Wonder Woman 84. But I think there was some of the, he was into the non-standard stuff, I think. And so yeah, there you go. Wonder Woman's weakness, being tied up by a man. Now, my personal favourite, which you might think that was, but it's not. My personal favourite is Green Lantern's weakness. Now, do you know what? Well, he's actually got two. Again, going back to the Golden Age, but do you know what Green Lantern's weakness is?
No.
It's the colour yellow.
I don't know what's worse, Dave. I'll be honest with you.
Well, I said that's my favourite, but maybe on the previous theme, his other weakness is wood. I don't know if they're related, but let's probably move on from that. So yeah, ultimately, a superhero, he has to have a weakness because that kind of grounds him and that allows you to create these stories. But I thought just for fun, we'd go through some of the more random ones there. Now, Chris, do you want to give us some movie background?
I do, yes. So it's M. Night Shyamalan, isn't it? It's a really strange name, isn't it? That's how you pronounce it, Dave. Yeah, so Mr. M. Night Shyamalan, who created Unbreakable, at the time, before this came out, was making Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, basically. And he approached Bruce Willis and said to him, he had this part in mind after the film, he wanted to go into pre-production for Unbreakable. So Bruce was on board. Then Bruce Willis, which is a bit random this, Dave. Bruce Willis was in Casablanca in a casino, and he met up with Samuel L. Jackson, which obviously they've worked together on various other films, most notably Pulp Fiction and Die Hard 3, actually, Dave, as well, which is actually one of my personal favourites, unfortunately, despite what the critics say. But they were together. He canvassed the film to Jackson and said, we want him on board. Would you be interested? And that's basically where it went from there. Now, Shyamalan actually approached Disney with this script. And I didn't actually know this, Dave, until I was researching it. But Disney decided, they wanted it. They purchased his screenplay for $5 million. And they also gave him another $5 million to direct it, which is fantastic. So before he'd even left the house, he'd made $10 million on this project. Nice. So he'd done well. But I didn't know that Touchstone Pictures was under the Disney banner. Yeah. So that's something I didn't realise. And it was quite nostalgic watching it when it came on, because that come up, and that's something that you always associate with renting VHSs out at the video shop for me. Touchstones, you never seen.
Wasn't Platoon Touchstone or something?
Yeah. There's a few like that, Dave. A few. And there's never any of my dodgy karate films, but that's all for a different episode. But yeah, so then from there, Shyamalan and cinematographer Eduardo Serra, they chose a certain camera angle. They wanted two different cameras to simulate the cartoon panel. Now, we had this on, it came after this, to be fair, but on Sin City, for anyone who'd listened to our previous shows, we reviewed that before. So it was very similar to that, the way they went. But at the time, it was quite revolutionary because they were one of the first ones to try it, Dave, on a big screen production, which was really, really good for that. Now, there's more than 15 minutes worth of extra footage, which I believe is worth a watch. So if you can actually get the Unbreakable DVD, which is out there somewhere, you can actually see this. So I will be quite interested to see that, Dave, to see whether it adds something to the film we're about to review. Now, box office-wise, it was a complete success, Dave, an absolute sleeper hit, come from nowhere. It was released on the 22nd of November, 2000. In its opening weekend, it made $30.3 million, which is brilliant. And it had finished second at the box office for that month, which is really good. Now, the film ended up in America and domestically, $95 million it made dollars. And then worldwide, it made $153 million. So off a budget of $75 million, just from the cinema alone, they'd made $248 million on the top of that. So it was a complete profit. But one of the things that stands out more than anything, Dave, was it actually made a lot of money from the DVD and video sales. It grossed $123 million. So altogether, it made $371 million, which was netted a return of 495% on their investment, which is absolutely outstanding. So I think that $10 million that Mr. Shyamalan got up front was paid in dividends and some at the end of it, which is fantastic. Now, critical response, absolutely above average reviews, generally favourable. On Rotten Tomatoes, he's at 69% off 164 reviews, with an average user rating of 6.3, which is still really good. Not as good as the last couple of episodes when I mentioned the averages, Dave, but still above average. And it was actually a cult hit, this, with a lot of people at the time, because it come from nowhere, as you said to earlier on. Now, on Metacritic, it's at 62% out of 100 based on 31 critics. But what's interesting on this, Dave, when I've mentioned before about the audience cinema score polls, where we've got this A+ to F scale, it only scores an average of a C, which is right in the middle. But when you actually read stuff about it, it's in people's top 10 lists of superhero films. So I find that quite interesting. I think, again, we've discussed this loads of times regarding what people's reviews are, what the critics' reviews are, and somewhere in between is where you would see it yourself. And I just find that really, really interesting after all these episodes, how you can never gauge what people like or don't like. And I just find that, I just think it's a real good subplot to the whole film as well. That it's loved by some and not by others. I know it sounds really silly because that's like most films, but we're having such a cult following.
I think this could be a split between people who had the surprise and people who haven't.
Yeah.
So, when I watched it, I had no idea. And actually, I read a quote fairly recently, I think, that M. Night Shyamalan had said that Disney had told him, you cannot call this a superhero movie. Now, this is back in 2000, isn't it? So this is before Disney had bought Marvel and we had the MCU and all that stuff. So I don't know, maybe they already had ideas that they were going to go down this route, but I thought that was interesting. I think they tricked us into going to watch this, and it just turned out to be a superhero movie, and there's lots of surprises in there, and obviously the big twist at the end. So I think when it's the surprise, you think of it more fondly. If you go into it and you're thinking, I'm watching a superhero movie, probably you're going in with a different expectation, and you might not enjoy it the same.
Yeah, that's fair comment there, Dave. Fair comment. So, Dave, are we going for the review then?
Yeah, let's go for it. Okay, so we open up, we see a baby being born, and we're not quite sure what's happening. It's got the whole tone of this movie, I think, is very quiet, isn't it? It's very atmospheric, and people seem pretty happy. There's obviously new baby being born, but the baby's crying quite a lot, and then the doctor comes in and he seems to look a little bit accusingly at the nurses of, have you dropped this baby or anything? And the mother's starting to get a little bit worried. She's saying, should the baby be crying like this? And he just says both his arms and legs are broken. Now, at this point, this is literally the first thing you see in the movie. So, again, I'm kind of wondering, this is, 19 years after I watched this. So I know you've just been watching this one for the first time, Chris. So what did you make to that whole opening?
I think, I don't know why, and it sounds really bizarre for people to watch. It reminded me a little bit of Blade in some respects. I don't know why. They sort of, the baby crying, it sounds so bizarre, Dave, because it's totally different films and context. But I don't know. I mean, you've got the doctor who comes in, he was actually out of London's Burning, and then he's in a program that my wife watches called Chicago Fire. He's an English actor, and he's obviously there, like, looking at the baby and stuff and all this. And I don't know. He's setting up the character, isn't it, of who he is in the film. We all pretty much know who he's going to be, but I couldn't say I was convinced by it, and I certainly wasn't convinced by some of the wigs that the women were wearing. I've got to be honest, Dave.
So not starting off with not grabbing you straight away. I mean, initially going back to the first time I watched this, I'm like, I have no clue what's going on at all. Again, we were reviewing this, so you kind of knew it was a comic book movie going into it. But initially, my initial thoughts were just one of intrigue. It's like, what what the hell's going on here? Because you go straight from that to, we see Bruce Willis on a train. And I do like this little, the kind of camera angle and it's moving around. So it's almost, the camera angle is almost from a little kid, in the front seat. And he's just looking back and looking at Bruce Willis. And then, this young lady sits down next to him, and you see he's taking his wedding ring off, and you kind of think, he's maybe a bit of an unsavory character here, what's going on? And then it all gets a bit awkward, and she's like, no, I'm married, it's fine, I'm going to sit somewhere else. And he crashed and burned in spectacular style. But again, a very quiet scene, I think, just very atmospheric, trying to, again, initially when I was first watching this, I'm thinking, maybe he's a bit of an adulterer, when he takes his wedding ring off and shoves it in his pocket. It's never a particularly good sign, is it? And then we start to see, after a while, we can see that the train, is wobbling a bit. We don't quite know what's going on, but that's where the train goes off the rails and ends up crashing. And the doctor, again, another quiet moment, the doctor is talking to David, and he's saying, I'm a bit surprised, because not only are you the only survivor in this, but there's not a single scratch on you. This just doesn't make sense at all. And I think I seem to remember from the trailers back in 2000, that was one of the lines they kept using in the trailers. Again, you've no idea what's going on at this point, but this is all part of the intrigue building up. Yeah.
And again, Dave, I think I'd said to you before we recorded this, I probably saw, I've never seen it properly at all. I like to say it's for the first time only. I don't know if I've seen it on in the background at some point, and I've caught little bits of it, but I do seem to recall seeing this bit with him in the hospital, but having no context of what it was about, just him walking through, whether it's somewhat on YouTube I've come across. But again, Bruce Willis, he is a great actor. He's very understated as an actor, I've got to say. Yeah. And he plays emotion very well. I mean, I thought he was a revelation in Sixth Sense, because obviously I'm a massive John McClane fan, Die Hard, all that sort of action. So I love Bruce Willis. And to say he's typecast in any action film he does, he pretty much is John McClane in anything he does as action. But he does have this other switch where he can go the other way, and he shows his emotions very well. And he's quite powerful, some of the scenes. I think his acting is pretty much standout in this film for me, Dave. I think he is. I know it's pretty much centered around him and Samuel L. Jackson's character, but I think for me, Bruce Willis comes out the other side with a lot of credit on this one.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was outstanding, and again in these very quiet moments, and there's not a lot of talking, not a lot of dialogue in quite a lot of the scenes, but I thought he was brilliant as well. But yeah, I mean, it turns out, doesn't it? He's not an adulterer as such. He's basically in a completely loveless marriage with Audrey. They're living in the same house. Their son's still in there. They're beyond all of the fighting and everything. It's just kind of pleasantries around the house and all very awkward. But yeah, pretty not a great environment to be in. But yeah, obviously coming out the other end. So old David, he goes to the memorial service for all the other train survivors and gets back to his car, and he's got a little note on there for Elijah's art gallery, and there's a message asking if he's ever been ill. So, and this is where we get Samuel L. Jackson. And again, I did love this little introduction to Elijah, Samuel L. Jackson's character, because he's talking through with someone, this piece of art, this piece of comic book art, and talking about it as if it's a Rembrandt or something that is a classic art piece. And I sound like I'm poo-pooing it a little bit. I'm really not, because I appreciate it in the same way, and it's just good to see it up there on the screen. And so he convinces this guy. He says, this guy says he'll buy it, and then he says, my son will love this. And then he completely turns, doesn't he? And he's like, how old is your son? And basically starts to tear strips off him and says, no, I'm not selling it to you now, get out. This isn't a toy. And isn't for children. This is serious stuff. So again, very, very, in a short, quiet scene, you get to know quite a lot about this Elijah character, don't you? And what his values are, and how highly he holds up comic books.
I've got to be completely honest now, Dave. For the show, I absolutely hated Samuel L. Jackson in this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely hated his dodgy wig. I'm going to go for... I thought of you straight away, because as soon as I saw the comic book and the artwork that's portrayed in the backgrounds in a lot of these things to do with Elijah, I thought of you, and I thought Dave's going to be smiling at that, because he's proper nodding. You're getting... Later on, you get the fall stuff in the background and all that. And I was thinking of you, thinking, oh, this is a proper comic book fan, pure, it's an absolute fanboy service, even if it's not based on a comic book. But I must have said, I absolutely detested him, Dave. And I like Samuel L. Jackson, but whether that was a good character he was because of what he was playing, I don't know. But I just think, I don't know. I don't know why it bugged me, but it just did. Every time he was on the screen, I was just like, oh, he's doing my head in. I don't know why. I can't explain it. And I know that sounds bad, but it just really bugged me, especially his wig. His wig.
So one of these is kinky afro.
Yeah.
It's very much like, I don't know if you've ever seen the IT Crowd. There's a character in there called Morris Moss, and it's very much like that. I mean, this was before the IT Crowd. But, we kind of, I think we're going to have a bit of an inadvertent Samuel L. Jackson season on the shows, because we're going to have this. We're going to do Glass when that comes out this coming week. He's going to be in Captain Marvel, seems to be quite prominent in that. We've seen that he's in Spider-Man. And I'm guessing he's probably going to be in Infinity War as well. So, it's going to be a bit of a Samuel L. Jackson season for this first half of the year. But, yeah, I think I kind of know what you're talking about there. I mean, my first Samuel L. Jackson introduction, if you like, was Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
And just that. He's just so brilliant in that opening scene. But a lot of the characters that he's played since are all derivatives of that for me. He's talking about his foot massage with John Travolta.
Yeah.
So this is a very, very different character, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can see why that may jar with you a little bit.
Yeah, and like you say, he might just be narrow-minded because he's always typecast as the same guy, and he's this badass. He swears a lot. He's very aggressive. He's very in your face, and he brash character. And I mean, no matter what film he's been in, he pretty much plays that. Other than Kingsman, where he had that lisp on, when he was egomaniac and megalomaniac sort of thing. But again, it is what it is. But yeah, I don't know why, Dave. It just really bugged me. So apologies on that one. But I thought I'd have to fess up on that on the podcast. I can't not say anything.
No, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah, so David, and he brings his son along as well. They meet with Elijah, and Elijah spells out his ideas around comic books, and this idea that they're based on real things, real people. And so he's kind of looking for these real people, but there's some holes that's in David's story that just don't make sense. The fact that he'd been injured when he was a kid or when he was at college, and he's not fully bought into it, but he knows there's something about David that warrants follow-up. And David himself, he just thinks it's all a big scam, and so he just walks away. But it does, what Elijah said does kind of play on his mind a bit. And then Elijah follows him to work. So he's been this security guard, and he's saying, well, you could have done anything. So why did you choose a job that was protecting people? And again, he's not only asking the questions, but he's planting the seeds in David's head as well about, well, just got these intuitive feelings and whatever, and I've never really questioned them before. And while he's stood there talking to Elijah, he ends up pulling someone out the queue or giving them the eyeball, and then they turn around and run off. And he said he kind of had this vision of him having a gun in his pocket, like the movies. But that was it. David just writes it off as an intuition thing. But Elijah leaves him and he tries to follow this bloke, tries to chase after him, doesn't he? And then you get these, obviously he's got his brittle bones, so he was the baby in that opening scene, and he's walking kind of awkwardly down the stairs, and he's got his little glass cane there, and his cane goes flying and smashes quite spectacularly against these stone stairs. And then a really, really painful scene, I think, where you end up, he loses his footing because he's just been trying to go too quick and falls down the stairs and hits every stair on the way down. And, in this crumpled heap on the floor, he ends up upside down. And this is where you're saying, Chris, you hated Samuel L. Jackson in this, but I thought he was pretty good. And in this scene, he conveyed just that expression there, being in agony, but he also had this joy because he can see that this guy did actually have a gun, exactly how David had described it. Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, Dave, as much as I didn't like his character, I didn't want to see that happen to him. I know it's a film. I genuinely grimaced at that bit when he fell. I was like, oh, geez.
It's horrible, wasn't it?
Very, very well directed. The stunt choreography was great. And I like the fact that when his cane went, it shattered into glass. I thought that was really good. I thought the whole thing was really good, Dave. And I've got to say, hand on heart, I did root for him a little bit then, because I was thinking, oh, that guy's in a lot of pain, like what he's had to go through. So that was good. That was, I'm not just saying that because you've said it. I genuinely did sit there and grimace, and I did have a bit of sympathy for his character.
Yeah, and obviously this is a disease that's grounded in reality, isn't it? There's nothing comic booky about this, unfortunately people do have this. So again, it is very gritty. We talk about this being a comic book movie, but it's no Captain America, is it? It's not Iron Man. This is gritty stuff.
Yeah, it is. I've got to say though, Dave, I found it a bit difficult to follow in parts with some of the comments and some of the dialogue. And now that I know who's directed it, it has a lot of similarities to the way Sixth Sense was produced and directed, to be fair. And it's going to. I know it's naturally going to do that because it's the same director. But the more I thought about it afterwards when I properly researched it, because what I will do is I won't research it properly until after I've watched it. So I go into it blind. Obviously it's something I've already watched, it's fair enough, but it's something I've never really seen or know a lot about. I like to go into it blind and make my own assumptions of it and make my own opinions of it. So I researched this afterwards, and then I got what he was going for and how he did it. It had a lot of the DNA of the Sixth Sense. If you've not seen the Sixth Sense, you won't understand, but if you have watched it, you will. And I could see that his blueprint was there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, for me, this is a film like Sixth Sense that your first experience of watching it is different to the second time of watching it, because there's no twist at the end. You know what the twist is, so you pick up a lot more of the dialogue. So I'm not saying he's a one-trick pony. I think he is more talented than that. I think he's had some unfair criticism, but I think for me, I have seen this one multiple times, and I think you do pick up more the more times you watch it, and you're more in tune with a lot of the dialogue. But so I mentioned about Elijah planting these seeds of doubt in David's mind. And also, Joseph, his son, was there as well. And so he's definitely, he's thinking about what Elijah said. And for me, one of my favorite bits in this movie, and again, there's not much talking. It's just very atmospheric, a very quiet scene. But when he's down in the basement doing his bench pressing, and he's trying to lift whatever it is. I think he starts with 250 pounds. And he didn't realize, it was quite that much. It was actually his son, Joseph, who'd put a bit more on. And they says, you shouldn't have done that because it's really dangerous. So can you take some off? And I don't know if, again, it's probably not on his iPhone. They weren't around at the time, but he obviously wasn't paying that much attention because the son, instead of taking some off, he put some more on.
Yeah, I didn't get that. I was thinking, well, as somewhat, you go to the gym, I go to the gym. I've been under many bench presses, Dave, and trained. And you pretty much know if you're not putting the weight or what someone else is putting on. You don't just sit there blind here. And I didn't conceive that very well. Yeah, I didn't conceive that very well. That he's 10-year-old son. He's picking weights up. He's telling him to stand back, but he's happy for him to pull or put weights onto a bar that he's about to lift.
Yeah.
Like, that didn't really give me any context on whether it was supposed to depict David as he's away with the fairies or something. I don't know. Or he's got his mind. I don't mean in a derogatory. I mean his mind is just completely elsewhere. That he's unaware of what's going on. I don't know. But I liked the scene because it was building up, he was building up the weight and all that, but I didn't get what they were going for with it.
Yeah, so I think the fact that, how he snuck those extra weights on, I think we're just supposed to gloss over that. But yeah, when he realizes he's got more weights on, then they're like, right, what else can we put on there? So they're strapping tins of paint and stuff, and he ends up bench pressing like 350 pounds, which is a lot more than he's ever done before. So I thought I really liked the scene, and I think story-wise, they're just trying to tell us, well, David's never really, really pushed himself. And then so when he does push himself, he does things that he never thought were possible. So, for his son, for David, it's building up this picture that actually, Elijah might actually be onto something here. And at the moment, Elijah just seems like this friendly guy, doesn't he? He's not your conscience like Jiminy Cricket, but he's like a bit of an advisor. And I think, in David's mind, there is something potentially there, but to his son, he's still trying to very much play it down.
Yeah. And I think that's actually, I think the lad who plays his son, Joseph, he's a very good little actor as well, Dave. Obviously now, what is he? He's probably about 30 now.
19 years later.
Yeah, he's like 30 odd now or whatever he is. But he does play it well, and I think he's acting with Bruce Willis, and the interaction's very good, to be fair. I think the dialogue's really good.
Yeah. And so the next thing we're getting his son Joseph, he's in trouble at school, and it turns out he thinks he might be like his dad. So he's trying to play the hero at school and ends up getting into a bit of a scrape. And the school nurse, she's not had the Aunt May treatment like we spoke about earlier. So, so she's obviously been around there for a few years, and it turns out something that David had completely put to the back of his mind and forgotten about. But he nearly drowned at school, and they ended up changing the whole rules. And it's like a school urban myth, isn't it, about this kid that nearly drowned. It turns out it was David. So, he'd forgotten about it, but after this nurse tells him, he's like, oh yeah, nearly drowned. I can't possibly be a superhero. And so tells Elijah on the phone that this is the case, and, sorry, I'm not your man. I can't possibly be super because I nearly drowned.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure, like I say, Dave, I've been really negative with this one. I can only apologise if it's coming across like that, but I'm really struggling with this. Really struggling. I couldn't get the connection at times between him and Elijah. I know a bit later on there's a connection as such, but it was just so random what was going on. Honestly, there's not been a film I've watched for a long time. Even some of the garbage that we've reviewed, Dave, which I absolutely love the garbage stuff, as you know. I didn't know what was going on, but this one, I was having a hard time. And I know that might sound daft, like you say, you've watched it so many times. You think, what are you talking about, Chris? But it just was a bind. But I will say as well to everyone listening, I did watch this in 2 or 3 stages because I was getting pulled from pillar to post while I was watching this. And usually I sit down in one sit down so you get the full immersion of the actual story, the dialogue, everything else. And I know we pick holes and stuff and we have a laugh at that, but I really struggled in this. And I don't know why or whether it was because of that, because I was sat down for, say, half an hour, then I had to do something else or someone rang me or whatever. So it did take that away. So I really want to go back and watch it again, to be honest. Because I was struggling because we both looked at each other, me and Sam were like, what is going on? I went, I ain't got a clue.
I don't honestly think I think it is one of those you have to be in tune with it. It's not like homework. You don't have to concentrate hard.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can multitask and sort of stop and start it. I do think, and again, it's life's too short to sit down and watch movies that you don't enjoy, unless you're reviewing them for a podcast or something. But I think for me, again, because I'd watched it that initial time, with The Sixth Sense in mind. The Sixth Sense was atmospherically, I think, very similar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm guessing you would have been in the cinema for that.
Yeah, well, we did. We went to the cinema to watch it because I was totally blown away by that, especially the twist, Dave. That was something else, something that I didn't even see coming. I genuinely didn't when I watched that. So
I think that the way you're watching it has possibly influenced how you're enjoying it, but maybe just speculating. But anyway, so back to the story. So Elijah's a bit deflated, isn't he? And he's in the comic book shop there, making himself very awkward. So the comic book guy is trying to get him out there, and actually considering how brittle his bones there, and he's got the pins in his leg holding his bones together and everything. I was grimacing a little bit because he kept slamming into the comic books and stuff, and I'm like, I think if it was me, I'd be going around in a massive bubble, trying not to hit anything. But he ends up knocking off this Adventures of Sentryman comic, and then he suddenly picks it up, and then he seems to have had a little bit of an epiphany there, and the guy's about to call the police, but he's like, "Can I buy this one?" Now, Adventures of Sentryman, I will just say that is just made up for the movie, I think. I'm not aware of that being an actual comic book, and I was trying to research it, couldn't find it at all. So there is a superhero in the Marvel universe called the Sentry. Not a massively popular character because it's basically a Superman knockoff. So he appeared quite a lot through the last decade, but I've not seen much of him in recent years. But yeah, so this gives him his epiphany, and he basically says to Dave, calls David up and says, the whole water thing does not rule out that you're a superhero. So superheroes have a weakness, and it just so happens that water is your weakness. And after this, we get David recalling, because another hole to the whole story of whether he's a hero and has he ever been ill, has he ever been injured, is the fact that he was in this car crash when he was at college and he had to give up his football career and just take a regular job. And then we get this recreation of that event, and we see actually he wasn't injured at all. But we know from his wife, Audrey, that she hates football. She's a physiotherapist, isn't she, by trade, and she just hates the violence to it, and was always worried that he'd get hurt. And so David actually he gave up everything for Audrey, and he basically made up this story that he was injured. It seemed like a good excuse, and so he gives Elijah a call and says, "No, I've never been injured or sick."
Yeah, and I must admit, Dave, just a quick note, that the lad who played a young David, I thought his mannerisms were bang on when they panned to him as Bruce Willis. So, the nose and that was slightly the same. I don't know whether they'd done a bit of, artistic, they wouldn't have done CGI, I suppose, but something along them lines with a bit of cosmetic makeup. But genuinely, I did think his mannerisms, the last shot of him holding Audrey, and that was really good. I thought, you know what, that's pretty good for a young lookalike. Most things they don't even try, do they? They'll have bigger ears, a smaller nose, or a bigger nose, or whatever, or different eyes. But they actually tried with this lookalike, and I thought it was quite good. I thought it was a good scene, to be fair.
Yeah, I agree. And again, so I quite liked it. What I think, if I'm to be critical, I think another one of David's weaknesses seems to be his memory. He doesn't seem to remember these absolute life-changing events like nearly dying and drowning, or, completely making up the fact that he was injured and couldn't remember that he'd made it up, couldn't remember that he had no pain probably, and certainly didn't have crutches or anything. So, I think that's one. We'll put memory being another one of David's weaknesses there.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe thinking back now in hindsight, is it something that they're trying to say he's blocked it all out? he maybe, is it supposed to portray that deep down he knows that he's special, but he's blocked it out for that many years? That, like they say, there's a saying, isn't there? If you tell a lie to enough people and say it enough times, you start believing it as the truth, you know. So maybe that's what he's supposed to depict. I don't know, but that's what I thought of it anyway, Dave.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
so,
it could be.
Yeah, no, it's a good spot though, very good spot. And then I've got to say, Dave, Elijah has a word with David, and he says, "Look, you need to go where people are to test out his powers." Now, I've got a problem with this, Dave. This
Go on.
bit. So we're in. Is it a train station we're in?
It looks like, yeah,
Like a train station, doesn't it? Like a big entrance of a train station. Now, David stood there. He's got what can only be described as a Grim Reaper security top on. It's like it's a Mac in it, like a proper, because it's raining. It's raining, so he's got a big Mac on. He's stood in this hall, station area, whatever. People are going past him. Now the colours are coming up, aren't they? And all of a sudden, he starts seeing different things, doesn't he? And little things have happened, and crimes have been committed by at least 2 or 3 people. And I just thought he ends up seeing this guy knock on someone's house, and the gentleman who owns the house answers, doesn't he? And he says to him,
Yeah.
"Can I help you?" And the guy's there, and he's got one of them like fly doors that they have, don't they? All the like to keep the insects out. He's opened his front door, and he's like, "I really like your house." And it's like, okay. And then he pulls the door, and the next minute we pan to this bloke who owned the house. He's now dead. He's like obviously shirt and tie, blue collar guy. And this guy's killed him. And at the same time, the guy who's killed him goes right past across the front of David's bow in a bright orange prison jumpsuit, which isn't. It's a janitor's jumpsuit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that was to depict the comics, Dave. I don't know whether you can give me anything that you can relate that to, because he stood out. He's wearing orange and everyone else was wearing black. So pretty much. So I don't know. And the only time any colour come on was when there was a baddie or someone who committed a crime for that split second. I don't know. Is that to symbolise something from the comics? So is that just...
I don't think it's particularly to symbolize anything from the comics, but like I said, with the green for David and the purple for, Elijah,
yeah.
I just think that use of those kind of vibrant primary colors, I think is probably, if anything, I'd never considered that before with the janitor, to be honest. It just made him fairly distinctive and stand out, didn't it? But yeah, I don't think that's a particular comic callback, apart from, like I say, just comics are very bright and colorful, aren't they? So things that are in the background are less important. Yeah,
and obviously David's there. You might as well have had a big arrow on this guy saying, "I am the bad guy," and the janitor sort of does a bit of cleaning up, picks a bit of rubbish up and goes around a bit. And then he walks into the maintenance, staff only area. And we get that David is sort of following in them because he sees that this guy has created an atrocious crime and killed this gentleman. But again, the guy who's the janitor, he had he reminded me of Mike Myers, Dave. It was like, he was an absolute huge
the beast, wasn't he?
He was an absolute gorilla of a man. He was massive. He must have been about 6'5", 6'6", but he's proper big bloke. And obviously then we get David then follows this janitor guy back to his house, up these stairs. It's raining, across the road, and then he goes to the house, don't we? And he picks a bit of mail up. But what we then allude to is the fact that this is the house that he said he liked. But I've got to say though, Dave, I found it really difficult that this was the main antagonist for David. I don't know why, because it just happened all of a sudden. I know that, and this is a film, and it's not just about this janitor guy, but I felt that was a little bit rushed to get his powers back.
Do you mean after? So he gets taken by surprise, doesn't he, by this bloke, and he just chucks him into the pool, so he ends up drowning, and then it's the kids who actually fish him out there. Do you mean after that?
No, I'm sorry. When he gains his powers, I felt that was too easy, that he's now got in a public place and randomly just picked out something, a crime, and then followed him. That's all. I didn't mean when he gets his powers back.
Oh, right. Okay.
We're going to talk about what he does in the house. Sorry, Dave. Yeah.
Okay. So I get you. So in terms of that extrasensory perception and being able to tune in to what people have done if they've committed crimes or whatever, I hadn't thought about that being too quick. considering he's navigated, looks like 40, 50 years of his life, without this, and then suddenly he can do it. So yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. I was more focused on the fact that, he's seen all these horrible, horrible crimes. And actually, most of them, it's things that they've done in the past, so he can't do anything about all of them, can he? One that I thought was particularly haunting was there was a bedroom scene, wasn't there, where there was a young girl pretty much passed out drunk. He brushed against this young lad, and it's the young lad, and he's just closing the door.
Yeah, very chilling. And very, very dramatic. I did think this was this sort of tension and suspense, I do feel was missing in bits of the film. And I think obviously Shyamalan's trying to use the dialogue more than he is the visual effect of the story and that. But I do think it could have helped, for me personally anyway. But I do think this at the end, this is a proper dodgy area for David to be in. And it's really interesting that this guy is he's a normal run-of-the-mill janitor, but he's an absolute psychopath, isn't he? How he's got to this part of his life, obviously we don't know any backstory to him, but he's obviously must have done this before, because you don't go from picking rubbish up to then torturing families. Very, very interesting direction for the film to take, I thought, at the end.
Yeah, and I guess the guy, I just found it, it's just horrible, isn't it? I don't particularly like those sorts of movies, and again, it's because it's something that could just happen every day, isn't it? And pretty horrible. And I think also, he hasn't leapt tall buildings in a single bound. He hasn't done anything particularly spectacular, other than you look at the size of this bloke, and he's clearly. David shouldn't be a match for him. So there's something he obviously has got some sort of super strength there to be able to take him down. But again, a fairly not a heroic moment, is it? Really, because he releases the mother, but she's already dead, unfortunately. So you've got these orphaned kids. He finds out he's a superhero, but it's a very bit of a damp squib, really, isn't it? There's no fanfares, there's no John Williams score, it's not Superman revealing the S on his chest or anything like that.
No, I did have a little bit of a problem though, was when he first goes into the room and obviously the janitor guy throws him over the balcony, doesn't he? And we get a good camera thing as if you would if well, I can only imagine you get thrown over a balcony, but the camera spins as if it's through David's eyes.
This is his point of view, isn't it?
Yeah, which I think is really good. It's like a first-person view, so I was really good. And then he lands on this sort of plastic sheeting, and then we get to the point where David then realises that because it's raining, it's a swimming pool. But so that, I thought, was real tension building, really like, oh my God, he's going to face his fear now. And he gets rescued by the two kids, don't he? They get a pole and rescue him and all that stuff. But I just found it bizarre that he went back upstairs and the janitor's just stood there looking over this woman. Now, he's just pulled a bloke out and threw him over a balcony. He's not bothered about the bloke coming back up. So he just lets him stand there while he chokes him. I thought that was really weak. Surely would have gone downstairs. I was expecting the bloke to come down and grab David round the neck or something and pull him out the water or something. I just found that bizarre. I just found that really... He's got two kids he's had hostage. And obviously the mum's on the radiator upstairs, but he decided to go back upstairs and just watch her while he was having a drink. I just thought that was really weird. Yeah,
maybe he's got a bit of a memory thing as well. Maybe he's a bit of a Dory, out of Finding Nemo. 3 seconds later, he's like, oh yeah, I forgot. What bloke?
I think, you know what, I'm going to take that as the explanation. That makes more sense, Dave, yeah.
That is his superhero weakness.
Yeah, it's random, isn't it?
But yeah, so I mean, after this bit, and like I say, it's kind of it's his heroic moment, but it's really not a heroic moment because it's still fairly unsavory. But then we're building up to the twist, aren't we? So David, he accepts it now. He is kind of this hero, and he goes to Elijah's exhibition and starts talking to his mum, and his mum gives us a little bit of dialogue again about how villains who, they're different. Some of them fight with physical strength, but others fight with intelligence and their minds. And again, this is all for us, really, isn't it? She's explaining it to David, but really this is for us. And, David goes down to meet Elijah. And, again, Elijah's kind of been his guide, in this voyage of discovery all along the way. And he says, we should shake hands now. And I think Elijah seems to know, doesn't he, about, David's going to figure everything out from this. But then David realizes they talked about, obviously there was the train crash where David was on and he was the only survivor, but they'd mentioned throughout the movie there were a couple of other tragedies as well, like this building had gone up in flames and all these people had died. There was something else I can't quite remember. And you get these flashbacks and you can see it was actually Elijah who'd set all of these things up. Yeah. And again, I imagine, because you're not really feeling it, and you've watched the movie in bits, if you like. But I remember watching this the first time. I was like, this was the Sixth Sense, moment for me. Where it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. All along this movie, I've thought, he's a bit odd, he's a bit quirky, but he's on the righteous side, And then you realize, oh no, he's a supervillain, committing mass murder.
Yeah, because I think as well, Dave, he knows they're connected, and David's probably the only one who can stop him as such. So I do agree with you. I did like the twist. I wasn't expecting that at all. Not expecting it at all. But again, what a clever guy, because he obviously knows that David's out there and he's probably been shadowing him for a long time. So I did like that at the end. I must admit. I thought it justified a bit more, especially maybe the last half hour of the film. I was more invested in that than I was at the start. So yeah, I think that's a nice little twist at the end. And I did not see it coming at all. I'll be honest with you, I didn't.
Yeah, and he gives, he kind of hinted at this all through the movie, but it kind of wraps it up at the end there that he thinks because he's so fragile, he's been dealt this particularly poor hand, and he thinks there must be someone at the other end of the scale. So he doesn't know about David specifically before the train crash, but he'll just set off these catastrophic events which will kill a bunch of people in the hope that he gets someone who survives it. And that'll be his lead to go and figure out, is this person who's like the mirror image, or on the opposite end of the scale to me. And that validates his own thoughts, how much he loves comic books, and his that kind of warped mind. But you're kind of like, well, he was right in the end as well.
Yeah, he was. But I thought it was a good ending, Dave. I thought that was a good scene. Sometimes you can remember things. You can watch a bad film or something that you think, yeah, it's all right, and then something can happen and you can elevate it. And I did. I thought this helped it at the end. It really did. It really did. And again, it set it up for a sequel. So, and that's exactly why Glass is now coming out in the next week. So,
yeah, 19 years later. 19
years later, but it was very well done at the end. I'll give him that, definitely. So,
yeah.
Good stuff, Dave. So, Dave, do you want to go into the review?
Let's go for it. So, Chris, I normally can never remember, is it me, is it you? And I'll just go with whatever you say. But I remember specifically last week, it was definitely me who went last week. So it's definitely you this week.
It certainly is, Dave. And I've listened to our episode last week that many times. Even I know it was you first. So, Kate coming into it, didn't have a clue. Always been aware of it. Like I say, I think I've picked up on the odd little bit. I was aware of Samuel L. Jackson's character Elijah, that he was, he had like the brittle bone disease and everything. I was aware of that. Picking stuff up, whether it was YouTube, as I said earlier, or what, I don't know. But there was a few scenes that were quite familiar to me. But again, as I said before, I genuinely just didn't get into it. I didn't like it or understand what was going on until the end. And it was, for me, it was too little too late in places. I think Bruce Willis, standout performance, fantastic, absolutely brilliant again. And I think he was coming straight off the coattails of Sixth Sense. And at this point in his career, he'd certainly washed his, well, he hasn't got any hair, but he'd washed his hair of John McClane at this point, because he was believable as somebody different than just a New York cop. So I'm very, very impressed with his performance in it. And I think the sadness and like the sadness behind his eyes, he does that really well, Bruce Willis, and he doesn't get enough credit in my opinion. But yeah, it's too much. Samuel L. Jackson's wig bugged the heck out of me all the way through. It was terrible. I just didn't like him as a character. Now that could be a good thing, but it could be a bad thing. But for me, it was a bad thing. So I think it's watchable. It's something I do need to watch again, and I will put a little asterisk against this review saying that I didn't watch it in one sitting, which I usually do with everything that we review. So I apologise for what I'm going to score it, but I'm sending it to Hell's Kitchen.
Very good. I probably would have put money on that one. So just to rattle through again, and I always remember after we've done the first one. So I know we do have quite a few new listeners out there, so we'll just run through our scale. So we start right at the top. If something is the best film or not the best film we've ever seen, but, you know, a top quality film, then we'll send it to the heavenly Asgard. If it's not quite at that level, it will be down one more, going to Atlantis. If it's kind of middle of the road, it will be Hall of Justice. Then down at the other end, we're getting down to near the bottom there, we're going to Hell's Kitchen. And then if we really think this should just be jettisoned off and never seen again by human eyes, we'll send it off to the Phantom Zone. Now, for me, I think this is a movie that your enjoyment is going to be determined on how do you go in with the surprise or not. And I think for me, I definitely went in not knowing anything about this. I didn't know that it was a comic book movie at all. I'd not long watched Sixth Sense, so I knew kind of what I was getting myself in for. And I think if you enjoy Sixth Sense, and you know, you can't spoil a 20-year-old movie, can you? Or probably you can. So it probably won't spoil Sixth Sense. But the atmosphere, the fact that there's lots of clues, and I can tell you, the second time you go through and watch this movie, you see what you think, oh, these must have been really subtle hints. You can see that, no, it's right in your face. You know, and somehow you just miss everything, but because you're not looking for it. So I think a lot of the atmosphere, I thought the music was great as well. I thought the color scheme was very subtle, but it was beautiful as well. I really liked the cinematography. I completely agree. I think Bruce Willis's performance was great, and I think Samuel L. Jackson's. I know it jarred with you, but I thought it was very good. I just think it was very different to what we're used to seeing in Samuel L. Jackson. Now, again, rewatching this movie, I don't quite have the same nostalgia that I'd say have, you know, watching something like Superman 2 or Raiders of the Lost Ark or Star Wars, something like that. It's not quite the same as that, but I did, you know, it's been a long time since I've watched this. And I think at certain moments, you know, throughout the movie, it is kind of a slow movie. And as I mentioned during our review, it is one that you have to concentrate on as well. But I still went through and I still enjoyed it. Again, you notice a lot more of the dialogue, I think, if you've seen it before, because you're tuned into it, a bit like watching Game of Thrones or something like that on a rewatch. And so for me, thoroughly enjoyed this again. I think, though, I would probably went into this thinking, you know, this is a potential to go to Asgard. I remembered it being that good, and it wasn't quite that good for me. But for me, again, with that baggage of when I originally watched it, I think this one's going to Atlantis for me.
Good stuff, Dave. Good stuff. I can't argue with that. Like, I know you're a fan, and I will watch again. So if I do, and I have done that before with stuff we've reviewed, haven't I, Dave? And I've come back, and if I thought it deserved to be changed, I have slightly changed it. So I will sit down at some point this year and watch it again.
Have you seen Usual Suspects?
Yeah. I love The Usual Suspects.
So how many times have you watched that?
Ooh, about 3 times, probably.
All right, okay. So I think I might have only watched it once or twice. And I really, really think of that movie fondly. But I'll be honest, I only really remember the end bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, David, I'll tell you why. It's very much like what we say about The Sixth Sense. That's a great point, because you'll never watch it again. Because it's one of them films you can't watch it again, because you already know there's this big twist at it. Spoiler if you never watched them. But The Sixth Sense, Usual Suspects, once that bit has come and gone at the end of the film, I could never watch it again. I don't know why. Just what I mean. Like,
yeah.
I've seen The Usual Suspects about 3 times because I had it on video originally, but I've not watched it for years. So whether that stands up, I always hold that in high esteem. But it's one of them films, because of that major plot twist. It's just, I'd end up watching it, critiquing it, going, "Oh, that's that's this." Maybe I should watch these sort of things. But yeah, that's a very good point, Dave. Very good point.
Yeah.
So, Dave, I just want to put a little plug in this week. Myself and you have actually joined a radio station called Indie Rocks UK, and that's Indie Rocks, or INDIE Rocks UK.co.uk. If you get over to their Facebook page or their website or Twitter, myself and Dave host the Comics in Motion show there once a week on a Tuesday evening between 7 and 8 live. So please get over there, give us a follow. We've got a lot of new listeners, and we're really enjoying putting the Comics in Motion product out there and something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a lot of fun because we mix in a bit of music as well, which is obviously something that connects you and I, Chris, going way back in the day. Exactly,
yeah. And we both enjoyed it. It's just an extension of this great podcast that we do. So we're really happy that someone's actually listened to, what we produce every week and review and our honest thoughts on this. And they wanted us to extend it to their radio channel.
So, Chris, how are you going to finish us off this week? Actually, probably don't need you to finish.
Every week I get teed up with this. So I don't know what to say. I can't believe that. You know what? Of all the things we've got going on, I genuinely forgot about this. And this usually, from the minute the podcast starts, in the back of my head, it comes from every 5 minutes going, I'm going to do Dave at the end here with the ending. And I've totally done me completely, mate. Honestly, bravo with that one. I've got nothing. I've absolutely got nothing.
Well, how about, so last week we'd done the 2008 Iron Man, hadn't we?
Yeah.
Obviously, this week we're doing Unbreakable. So why don't I just finish off and say, I am Mr. Glass.
This is one of Johann Davis's earliest drawings. See the villain's eyes? Mounted in the undercurrent. They insinuate a slightly skewed perspective on how they see the world. Just don't know.
Doesn't look scary.
Well, that's what I said to my son. But he says there's always 2 kinds. There's the soldier who fights the hero with his hands. And then there's the real, brilliant evil